Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Melissa and I'm the owner of SeasonedServedBlog.com. Today we are making a delicious beer, cheese, and potato soup using lots of local and delicious seasonal ingredients. So to start the soup, we are going to begin by chopping up our vegetables, and I'm going to chop up 2 sticks of celery. We don't have to chop the celery too finely, it can just be really rough because we're going to end up pureeing the soup in the end. So just a quick rough chop on the celery is great, and I'm just going to move this to the side here. And next we're going to chop up our carrots, and these are carrots from my garden, and I'm going to show you how cute they are. Some of them are a little bit wonky, but they're a super fun rainbow carrot blend, and together this makes up one big carrot. So I'm just using what I have in my garden for the carrots. But what we're going to do is just remove the stems. And then again, a rough chop is really all you need here. So that is the carrot. And then we're also going to chop up an onion. When you combine onion, celery, and carrots, it's known as a mirepoix, and this is really a great base to use to flavor lots of delicious soups, stews, and other recipes. So this is how we're going to start off our soup recipe. So with the onion, I'm just going to chop it really roughly. In addition to our mirepoix vegetables, we are going to spice it up a bit with some jalapenos. And this adds some amazing flavor and a little bit of spice to our beer, cheese, and potato soup. And I just think it is so good with it. So we're gonna add 2 jalapenos. If you don't like a lot of spice, you can remove the seeds and the membrane and all that, but I really enjoy it with the seeds and the membrane in there. It's not that spicy, I find, but it adds a really good peppery flavor. So I'm just gonna chop that up, seeds and membrane and all, and we're gonna add it to the pile here. And then when you're done chopping your jalapeno, make sure that you wash your hands because you don't wanna touch your eyes after this. Or for me, my contacts, oh, horrible. Okay, so I washed my hands, and the next thing I'm gonna cut up are some potatoes. These are just Yukon Gold potatoes, and I really like the Yukon Gold in this recipe because they're super creamy and delicious, and when you puree it, it gets really nice and smooth. So we're gonna chop up some of these, and I'm actually gonna cut these a little bit smaller, about into 1-ish centimeter cubes, just like this, just so that they cook a little bit faster when we add it to our soup. When you're chopping up your potatoes, you want to kind of make sure that they're roughly the same size. This is just so you don't have really small pieces that are already done and big pieces that are a little bit undercooked. It's not that great, so make sure that they are all roughly the same size. The beer of choice that I am using in this recipe is one of my favorite local beers. This is from Hoyne. This is their Hoyne Pilsner, and it has such a delicious malty flavor and a little bit of hops. I think with the soup, you want that malty flavor, but not too much hops, so the Hoyne Pilsner is perfect. If you're not local to Victoria or you can't get a hold of this Hoyne Pilsner, you can use whatever Pilsner you like. I would also say that lagers might work well, just make sure that they're on the maltier side, or even a pale ale will work really nice as well. Just make sure it is not too hoppy, or else that'll kind of overpower the flavors of all the vegetables and the cheese that we're gonna add later on. So now that our vegetables are all chopped up, we're gonna start by cooking all of our vegetables here from our mirepoix, and then we'll add our potatoes later on. So let's take our beer and our vegetables back to the stove. Okay, so now we're over at the stove and we're gonna start cooking our soup. So I'm gonna turn our pot on to medium-high heat, and we're gonna add some olive oil. We're gonna add about a tablespoon, and this will kind of just start getting the vegetables cooking. We actually don't have to wait that long because we have induction now. So, all right, so now that our pan is hot, we are gonna add in all of our vegetables. So the celery is gonna go in first, along with the carrots and the onions, and also all the jalapenos with the seeds and all. And we're gonna clean up the mess here. And once we add it, we're just gonna give it a little bit of a stir, just so that all of the vegetables get coated in the olive oil. Okay, so once we have all the vegetables in the pot and you can hear it sizzling, I'm just gonna turn it down a little bit, and we're gonna cook it for about 5 minutes just to allow the vegetables to soften up. And you can already tell the vegetables, even after being in there for 2 minutes, they're already starting to change color. So that is looking really good. So as our vegetables begin to soften, we're gonna add a little bit of salt and some pepper to them, and the salt will help draw out the moisture of the vegetables and help them become softer a little bit quicker. And we're also going to add some ground black pepper in here as well. I'm going to go for about 1 teaspoon because the black pepper in the soup is so good. I love the flavor of it. So as you can see, as the vegetables are cooking, there's a little bit of brown bits forming in the bottom of the pan, and this is a bunch of delicious vegetable flavor that we are going to deglaze relatively soon with the beer. And when the beer hits the bottom of the pan, it'll kind of pick up all those little bits and distribute them throughout the soup and make the soup really delicious. So we don't want to skimp out on those brown bits. We also want to make sure that those brown bits don't become black bits. So we're going to keep our vegetables moving until they've softened up. Okay, next to thicken the soup, we're gonna make a little bit of a roux, and that consists of butter and flour. So I'm actually gonna do it right in this pan with the vegetables. And to do that, I'm just gonna move the vegetables over to one side of the pot. So we'll make the roux on this side here, and the vegetables can just hang out on this side. And to even be a little bit more safe, I'm just gonna slide it so the vegetables are actually off the burner, but the other remaining part where we're gonna make the roux is still on the burner. Now our vegetables are all over to one side, and next we're gonna add some butter. This is about 3 tablespoons of butter. So that's gonna go right into the pan there. And then we're gonna let the butter melt. So now that all of our butter is melted, we are gonna add the same amount of flour, so 3 tablespoons goes right in. This is just under 1/4 cup. So we're gonna add that for now, and then we're gonna whisk it, just so that we don't end up with big clumps of flour in our roux. If you want to bring in those little perimeter vegetables into the roux, that is totally fine. So we're going to mix the flour all the way through the butter, make sure it's nice and smooth, and we're going to cook this for about 2 minutes over medium heat, just until the flour starts to smell a little bit nutty and delicious, and we cook out all of that raw flour taste. So next up, we're going to add our beer, and this is 355 milliliters of the Hoyne Pilsner going in. And as I add it, I'm gonna whisk just to make sure that we don't get any lumps in our flour. So here we go. I'm gonna add a little bit at a time just to make sure that we cook all those lumps out. And now we can kind of start mixing in the veggies a little bit more. I really like this method of just pushing the vegetables to one side of the pan when you're making the roux. This helps, first of all, to keep all the flavor going in the same pan, and you also have to clean up less dishes, which is very nice. So making it all in one pot is really handy, and it is definitely doable because look at how smooth this is right now. It looks so good, so thick and amazing. Sometimes I impress myself, but very nice trick to save on some dishes here. So as we cook the beer for 2 minutes, what it's going to do is it's going to evaporate a lot of the alcohol that's in the beer. So you're not really drinking any beer or any alcohol in the beer. All you're really getting is the wonderful beer flavors. So you can kind of smell it as it cooks. Once you first add it, you can smell a little bit of the alcohol coming off. But then after about 2 minutes, all you smell is the delicious malty and hoppy flavors of the beer. And it smells so good. It's like the scent of beer, but amplified with some vegetables, and it is so amazing. So now that all the alcohol is cooked off of the beer, we are gonna add some chicken stock just to make this a little bit more soupier. So I'm just gonna pour this directly into the pot, and I'm gonna stir to make sure that no lumps form. Now, if you wanna keep this vegetarian, you can definitely use some vegetable stock, but for me, I have chicken stock on hand right now, so that's what I'm gonna be using in this soup. And at this point, once we have the chicken stock added, we are gonna add our potatoes in. So these are just gonna carefully go into the pot here. Just like that. We're gonna turn the heat on high to get this to a boil. And to add some additional flavor that I think really complements the soup, I'm gonna add a sprig of thyme, and that's gonna go in whole. That's a fresh sprig of thyme, and we're just gonna mix that through. And that's gonna add some delicious herby, kind of lemony flavor to the soup, and it's gonna be really delicious with the beer and the cheese and the potato. Okay, so now that everything has come to a boil, we are gonna reduce the heat to medium, and then we're gonna cover the pot and let the potatoes cook. And since we chopped up the potatoes relatively small, they're gonna take about 20 minutes or so. So we're gonna let this simmer over medium heat, and then we're gonna come back, add a little bit more seasonings, and then puree the soup. All right, so after 20 minutes, we've come back and this is what the soup is looking like. So delicious and luxurious. And now we're gonna test to see if the potatoes are done. So all I'm gonna do is take a fork and just insert it into the potato, and it should go in completely easily without any resistance. Oh, actually, this is a carrot. The carrots are also done. All I'm gonna do is take a fork and just insert it into the potato, and it should just kind of flake and fall apart just like that. So now that all our vegetables are cooked, we're ready for the final flavorings. So one of the final flavorings that we're gonna add is some Worcestershire sauce, and I like to add this in at the end because if you cook it for a long time, a lot of the flavor really cooks out and you don't get that nice sweet and smoky flavor. So I put it in at the very end before we puree and mix everything together. So I'm gonna go in with about a tablespoon, which is the rest of my jar. No more Worcestershire sauce. I'm making the soup too much. I've been using it all up. And we're gonna also add some cayenne pepper. Now this is totally optional because we did add the jalapenos, but the cayenne adds a different layer of spice, and I think it is really nice in the soup. So for the cayenne, we're only gonna add about a 1/4 teaspoon, just like that. So it'll be a little kick, but not too much. We're gonna mix those through, and you'll see the Worcestershire sauce kind of turns the soup a little bit of a brown color, but that's okay because we're going to add an obscene amount of cheese right now. This is all the cheese we're gonna add, minus a little pile here for garnish, but this is 2 cups of grated old cheddar cheese. And I like to use old cheddar in this recipe because it's really sharp and has lots of really great flavor. So we're gonna add in the cheese about 1/2 cup at a time, and honey, what's wrong? You want some cheese? I don't think you like cheese that much, honey. So we're gonna add the cheese about 1/2 cup at a time, and we're gonna mix it in to ensure that it melts really well between each addition. And this helps to prevent the cheese from kind of clumping up and sticking together, which is okay, I think, because we are gonna puree this, but this is the way I like to ensure that we have a nice, smooth, and delicious soup. Okay, and then final 1/2 cup of cheese is gonna go in. I'm gonna save about 3/4 of a cup for garnish, just to go on the soup at the very end. So as you can see, it's really changed. It's not really a dark brown color anymore. It's a nice orangey, it's an orangey brown color now. Oh, and before I forget, we are gonna take out that sprig of thyme. That should have lost all of its leaves, and it's just the woody stem right now. So we're gonna take this out because sometimes if your blender is not that good, that doesn't get pureed, and then you're left with woody pieces of thyme in your soup, and it's just not good. We had that a couple of times when I was testing out this recipe, and I kept forgetting to take out the piece of thyme. So make sure you don't forget, make sure you take it out. So now that all of our cheese has melted in, we're gonna add 1/2 cup of heavy cream, and this is kind of optional. I feel like once you puree this soup, it does taste really good. But when I make the soup, I like to go all out and add the heavy cream because it just tastes so good and makes the soup really creamy and velvety. So we're gonna add 1/2 cup into the pot, and we're gonna stir it to combine. Okay, and now all of our final ingredients have been added. Now we're gonna go over and puree our soup. So now that our soup is ready, we are gonna go ahead and blend it. And to blend it, I am using my Vitamix blender here. If you have an immersion blender, just like a handheld one, that totally works as well. But to get it really extra smooth, I like to use the Vitamix because it just makes the soup super velvety and creamy and amazing. So we're gonna add our soup to the blender, and some very good blender safety tips. Whenever you're working with a hot or a warm soup or anything like that, you wanna make sure you don't fill it more than halfway, and you always wanna have a little vent at the top to allow steam to escape. So we're gonna go ahead and scoop our soup in and do this in halves, I think. That'll be the perfect amount. Okay, so that's about half the soup, and it's not coming up past halfway in the blender, so we should be okay. So we're gonna slide that on. So once the lid's on top, you can either use this to kind of angle it and make sure that the steam comes out of the soup as we blend it, But what I like to do is actually put a tea towel over the top really loosely, just kind of hold it down, and as it blends, the steam will kind of escape around the tea towel and there won't be any splashes or anything. So we're gonna do that. I find that that's the best method. So let's blend this up. We have it on, we have the puree setting, so let's go. So that's half the soup. As you can see, it's very hot. There's steam coming off of it. So I'm gonna just pour this into a container and then I'm gonna continue to puree the rest of the soup and then we'll combine it back together. All right, so now the second half of our soup has been blended. I'm just gonna add it back to the original pot that we made the soup in. And if it's gotten a little bit cold since you made it, you can easily just pop this back on the stove and heat it up. For us, it looks like it stayed nice and hot this whole time. So from here, we're gonna combine the halves back together and then we're gonna serve it up and it's gonna be so delicious. As you can see from the blending in the Vitamix or any sort of high-speed power blender, there is not a single lump in this entire soup. And look at how creamy and delicious and velvety it looks. It's just absolutely insane. It is so good. So I think in addition to the flavor of the soup, I think the texture of the soup is really nice and it's really something that I love. It is definitely a very rich soup, I would say, but it's really nice as a treat once in a while and you don't need to eat a lot. So this can feed about maybe 6 to 8 people if you just do a little cup serving, maybe 4 if you want to have a heartier serving, especially in the autumn and the winter months. This is a real stick to your ribs kind of soup. So now that we have everything prepared and the soup is looking amazing, I'm just going to do a little cleanup and then we're going to serve up the soup and garnish it. All right, so once your soup is all nice and hot, we are just going to serve it up in these beautiful little bowls. I love how these look. And we're going to add some garnish. So I'll actually move this over here. For the garnish, we're going to add some chives. These are the last chives from my garden. I think the cold weather is starting to take my chive plants, which is super sad, but you can still make this without chives. You can also just substitute scallions instead of chives if you want as well. So I'm just going to make sure I finely chop this up. And chives add a really nice brightness and freshness that I think the soup really needs with all the cheese and the dairy and everything else going on in there. It is really nice to have a nice bright oniony fresh bite in the soup. So in addition to the chives, we are going to use the remaining grated old cheddar cheese that we have here for garnish. And if you're a dairy girl like me and you love your milk and your cream and your sour cream, we can add some sour cream on top of this. And the sour cream is definitely optional because this soup is very rich as it is. But I think for the garnish and the plating, that extra little hit of the white on there looks really nice and fancy. So I'm gonna add a little dollop of sour cream with a little sprinkle of some cheddar cheese and then a nice sprinkling of fresh chives on top. And there we have my delicious beer, cheese, and potato soup. It is super thick, super hearty, very stick to your ribs kind of soup, which is really great in the fall and winter months. So I'm gonna grab a spoon, I'm gonna taste it. I don't think I've ever tasted anything on camera with you guys before because of our new video setup and our new video format, but let's give this a taste. Look at how thick and velvety that is. That is like a dip. You could put nachos in that, but it is a soup. So that is so good. Really thick, really hearty and delicious. And if you make this for anyone this fall and winter, they are gonna absolutely love it. And that is it for today's video. I hope that you enjoy this recipe for my beer, cheese, and potato soup this fall. And if you make this recipe, be sure to tag me on Instagram. My handle is @SeasonServeBlog so I can see your wonderful soup creations. And also, if you don't want to cook this recipe yourself and you want someone else to make it for you, make sure you send this recipe to your friends and family so that they can make the soup for you. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!